this focus on thought leadership is now even more of an imperative than it was, say, 5 years ago. The pace of change has just increased. There's a real sense, I think, amongst clients and prospects that they want to understand where is their partner or their clients or their suppliers' headspace. Where are they thinking things are moving toward when it comes to the sort of technologies that they want to implement? I don't think you can afford to be in a vacuum now and sort of say, hey, we've always sold it this way. We know clients are going to come back to us for more. We've got the lock-in strategies in place. It doesn't work like that anymore.
Our 49th episode of Everything Thought Leadership is with Euan Davis. Euan's career in thought leadership goes back to 1997 when he took the first of several jobs at IDC, Yankee Group, Forrester, Corporate Executive Board, and HfS. In the second phase of his thought leadership career, Euan has been at 2 technology services companies. The first was Cognizant, and since 2023, he's been at Virtusa, a mid-sized tech services firm.
Virtusa describes itself as a specialist in digital products and platform engineering. The company employs more than 27,000 people in more than 30 countries around the world. The firm was founded by 4 people nearly 30 years ago in Southborough, Massachusetts, outside of Boston. It has digital engineering centers in India, Sri Lanka, and Mexico. 11 years after Virtusa was founded, it held its public stock offering in 2007. By 2020, the company had grown to $1.3 billion in revenue, and that year it agreed to be acquired by a private equity firm, Baring Private Equity Asia, for about $2 billion. Today, the company is led by Nitesh Banga, who was named CEO of Virtusa in February 2025.
In our conversation, you'll hear Euan explain how he came to the thought leadership profession, the key moments in his career, his thought leadership strategy for Virtusa, and his biggest advice for people who are thinking of entering the field or people who have entered the field and want to move up quickly. Euan, this is about our thought leadership and tech services study. So one of our findings is that the majority of the tech services companies that we surveyed around the world, 300 companies, say thought leadership is important. What do you think has changed in the last few years in this sector that has increased the recognition by tech services firms of the importance of thought leadership?
For me, the thing that's changed is the speed of change. I mean, it's phenomenal to me how quickly the markets are now moving. So, for example, I've started putting together a leadership brief for the leadership here at Virtusa because there's just no real way of understanding what's going on with so many variables. So, for example, you listen to the analysts and they tell you one thing. You listen to the advisors and they tell you another one. You listen to our stakeholders and they tell you something else. So I felt there needed to be a way of trying to express what's going on, almost as a snapshot of time. So the brief is one way of doing it. But when I think what it means for our industry, the speed of change is just phenomenal. I don't remember things moving quite so fast in all my career. And I've been doing this for nearly 30 years now, which is rather sobering. But for 30 years, I haven't actually seen the pace of change this strong or this fast. So for me, that's the one thing that's changed. And clients are beginning to ask, well, what next? What do I do to protect myself? What's the context for my industry? And you've got this looming technology switch, which is agentic and everything else around it, around AI. But that's going to be a huge change for the industry going forward. So you have the speed of change around technology, and you have the technology itself, which impacts some thought leadership. So those 2 things for me are really changing how thought leadership is thought about, is created, is produced, and is disseminated as well.
Does that mean that tech services firms that kind of minimize the importance of thought leadership, which also means they don't spend very much, and they don't maybe even have people dedicated to it, it's part of 20 jobs, that is no longer going to work, especially for the smaller tech services firms? And by that, I mean, say, under $1 billion in revenue?
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think that's worked for a long time now. I'd say for about 5 years that hasn't worked. I think you have to proactively go to a client or to a prospect with a point of view to articulate, this is how we think things are changing. This is how we think you could be using technology. This is how we think your industry will look in the next 2 years, 3 years, even 5 years. And that context is really key. So I think tech services firms actually have to have that context before they're even allowed into the room. Because otherwise, there's no point. You're just commodity at the edge of the table that's never really going to be listened to. So I think thought leadership is more important than ever when I think about this industry and when I think about what I do and what the team does here at Virtusa as well.
So you've worked in companies, including pure research companies, Forrester, Corporate Executive Board, CEB, Yankee Group, analyst company, IDC. And of course, they're in the business of doing market research and thought leadership, best practices. So they get thought leadership, right? But the tech services firms who are not in the business of doing research, it seems to me they have, it's taken them time to recognize the value of thought leadership. Do you think, to some extent, that view on the part of tech services is, well, look, we use Gartner or HfS or, they do the thought leadership. We're the folks who implement software, basically. Why do we, at whatever, $500 million tech services firm, why do we need to be thought leaders? We let the IT analyst firms and the McKinseys and BCGs, we follow these folks. Do you think that sentiment is still out there on the part of some tech services firms?
I'm sure it is out there on the part of some tech services companies and firms, but I do think this focus on thought leadership is now even more of an imperative than it was, say, 5 years ago. I mentioned in my previous answer, the pace of change has just increased. And there's a real sense, I think, amongst clients and prospects that they want to understand, where is their partner or their clients or their suppliers' headspace? Where are they thinking things are moving toward when it comes to the sort of technologies that they want to implement or they want to use? So I don't think you can afford to be in a vacuum now and sort of say, hey, we've always sold it this way. We know clients are going to come back to us for more. We've got the lock-in strategies in place. It doesn't work like that anymore. And you've got to think there's a new generation of leadership moving into seat. And I think that changes everything. They're really well connected. They're looking at, points of view, thoughts, they're networked. They know what's going on. And if you're a supplier or a vendor and you don't have a point of view or you can't give a point of view, then I'm pretty sure you're going to get short shrift from your customer or your prospect because you can't satisfy them to sort of say, well, at least give me a counterpoint to how we're seeing our industry evolve. What do you think, Mr. Vendor? That's why I think you can't ignore it, and it's more important than ever. And there's lots of interesting collaborations between some of the analyst companies and vendors to make sure that they get that point of view right. But I think it's one of those job areas or one of those careers which is gaining in criticality, actually, for tech services vendors all over.
Having been in thought leadership in different firms for 28 years, what do you see as the key factors? Let's start with producing great content.
Good question. So I tend to start by looking at my business or looking at the business that I work for and trying to distill what are the high growth areas or what are the interesting asides or service lines or case studies that I think, okay, that's got something a little bit of magic about it. And I've been in my role for a couple of years, and I have listened into quite a lot of calls with our service line leads. And there's a few things which just sort of, spark my interest. I hear something, I think, oh, that's got something about it that could be made into a story that could grow and have legs. So I actually think the ability to listen into the business is key, and to make those connections around the business is key as well. So you have stakeholders that you can talk to and discuss with. And sometimes those stakeholders themselves need a little bit of a lead on how they should be thinking or how they could be thinking. So for me, I think the listening or understanding your business is key. And then understanding the trends in the market is key as well. And once you've got those two things you're done, then you triangulate by sort of saying, okay, well, how could this evolve? And where could I pitch my tent in terms of where our thought leadership could take the company?
I imagine it could be very easy to if you didn't do what you did, to just come in from the outside and say, we ought to do thought leadership on this topic, essentially because I'm interested. I, the newcomer, am interested in it. I think it's a hot area. I don't care how much client experience we have with this.
I agree. It's quite interesting, really, because you could arrive and just say, I need to build a McKinsey-style think tank, and I'm going to just build a McKinsey-style think tank. If it doesn't connect into the brand, or it doesn't connect into your case studies or your credentials or your heritage, no one's going to believe it. So, or want to read it. So I think those pieces are really important to understand: is your heritage, your brand, where your credentials sit, and where things are beginning to evolve towards. So for me, I've been doing a lot of work around data, because I think the whole focus on data, as the agentic wave begins to crash over all of us, actually having that solid data foundation is really key. And the great thing is we've actually got a little bit of heritage in there, well, a lot of heritage in there, but I think you just have to start from a position of truth and then roll it from there.
What do you think are the keys to getting target audiences to learn about some piece of thought leadership content? So keys to thought leadership marketing. And I'm separating thought leadership marketing from the brand stuff, which I see as, kind of a level above. With thought leadership is more at the kind of, I want to put it, product level. What are the keys to thought leadership marketing?
Internally or externally?
Yeah, it could be at any tech services firms. Look back in your career. What have been the keys to getting some great piece of research you're involved in actually in the marketplace?
It's a good question, because there's a lot of hard work that you have to do to make sure people are aware of what you've done and why the story matters. So you basically have to carry the bags of the salespeople, the consultants, and sort of say, look, this is why I think this is important, and be relentless. Say, this is why I think this is important. And that can be frustrating. But you will meet people along the way that really get it. And senior people that really get it will then, drive things for you, which makes life a lot easier. So I find getting invited to the right meetings and briefing out, sort of say, this is why this is important. And then you do the sort of collateral or the decks that you freely give away, which can be a little bit frustrating, but you just have to freely say, hey, here's the story, and go and pitch and use it. I'm also a big believer in toolkits around thought leadership, diagnostics, and things that basically align to the story. So there's lots of things in the arsenal that you can use. It's just trying to figure out what the audience needs and how to get them in step, I guess, with what you're trying to do. Luckily, I have a pretty good marketing team here at where I work now, Virtusa. They understand the importance of thought leadership, but there are all other ways that you can start thinking about service lines and service messaging, and you begin to get this kind of nice alignment through the organization. If, for example, you have a round table or you have a partner event, you have kind of service offerings, you have kind of case studies that all sort of tie around the theme, then you really begin to make a bit of a difference to how the company performs, I think.
That's great. And then the third question was about, and I think you partly answered it already, was about getting an organization that produced some great piece of research or a book or whatever to the organization to open doors with clients, meaning salespeople, to actually go out, or practice heads, practice leads, to use it to open doors with clients. I think you've done a lot of socializing. You mentioned socializing internally at Virtusa to let people open up the hood and understand the research that you've been doing. Is that critical, the internal socialization of a study, in order to get people internally to take it to market externally?
Oh, it's absolutely critical for me. Anyway, so I work for a smaller company. I used to work at a big, massive company with, it felt like China Telecom people that were working there. It was huge. And you had all sorts of functions and offices and, spotlights, webinars that you could sort of slot into and talk about what you're trying to do. What I've found here is you have to be a little bit more of a guerrilla operation and how you actually get the message out. And I can't stress how important it is to network with the right people or people that will take the message and cascade it around. So I think that focus on networking is key and even more critical if you're at a smaller company. You think it would be easier at a smaller company, but it's actually a little bit more challenging because you don't have maybe the sort of refinement of process or the teams available that you can just call on to do things. You literally have to start thinking, how am I going to get this message out? Who needs to hear this message? What forums are they going to hear this message? And what's the takeaway for them? So we created this what to know, what to say, what to show frame around our research. So every piece of research that we do from where I sit has a kind of what to know, what are the main messages, what to say, how do you look smart in front of a client, what to show. Here's the deck, here's the diagnostic, here's the tool that you can basically leave behind with a client and at least intrigue them to sort of say, you know what, Virtusa has a point of view, Virtusa has something to say, and we're open to the discussion and we'd like to help you understand our point of view and hopefully make you succeed in your role.
Yeah, that sounds like it's really critical because I can't imagine in any tech services firm that salespeople can figure out how to build those pieces themselves. They don't have the time. They may not have the skills, right? You can invest time in something that has an uncertain return.
You're spot on. If you put me in a sales position, it would be a disaster because I haven't got the sales mindset, and that's really important. And they can teach me things which I don't know. And they can teach me things to make my research a little bit more sharper, my approach a little bit more pointed. And I really appreciate that. So I feel like it's a collaboration or a partnership that you have to really focus on to move things to the next level. So I remember when I first started in this industry, I started on the vendor side. I've had two halves of my career, one half as an analyst, the other half as on the vendor side. I spent the first couple of years just carrying bags for salespeople. I thought I just need to get out and help them. So every time there was a board presentation or a strategic bid, I was the guy that could have a little bit of a futurist lens on it. And I was more than happy to get out there. And I learned an awful lot from the sales teams on how they actually held themselves and how they actually, talked about the solutions they were creating. But it also helped me in a sort of virtuous circle, if you will, sort of improve my research or improve my point of view and make sure the thought leadership really worked for the organization. I joined here a couple of years ago and my role was storyteller, which is quite an interesting job title. One of my CMOs sort of said, "What, were you the poet then for the organization?" I said, "Not quite. I think I'm more of a messenger, a narrative developer, and so on." And since then, my role has morphed into more of a kind of strategy and growth role. And I'm using thought leadership front and center on how you actually do that. In fact, I think your book, Competing on Thought Leadership, has been absolutely really useful to sort of frame what it is I'm trying to do. So when I got here, it took me about a year to get my feet under the table and understand who does what and why it matters and who I should be talking to. But one of the first things we did was do an exercise of mapping our case studies. And we had roughly about 300 case studies. And I went back in time and tried to, I guess, put them in different buckets, trying to understand exactly, well, what are we famous for here? What are we famous for there? What are we famous for over there? And what was really interesting for me is they were all written in a rather haphazard way. There was no golden thread through them to sort of say, oh, here's what we actually do. So with a little bit of help, thank you, we actually looked at how different themes were beginning to show through the case study analysis. So we had one theme around customer intimacy. If you've got millions and millions of customer interactions, that's where Virtusa can help. We had another theme around software implementation, so around Pega, around Salesforce, around ServiceNow, how we actually implement those platforms for clients. And we also had another, bunch or a bucket of case studies around data, on how you actually think about data, organize data, build data lakes, et cetera. So I had these three strategy triggers, and I was trying to understand, which one had most salience for where we want to go. And I have to say, I took a little bit of a gamble and went around data, because that for me, while it was clear from a bit of a kind of analyst kind of sentiment and talking around the industry, reading the reports, that the whole sort of AI thing was something that was going to carry on for years and years and years. And if you want to compete with AI, and now it's agentic, if you want to compete there, if you really want to double down on it, then the data strategy is key. So I decided to build a questionnaire, a survey, and find out what was going on with everything to do with data. And on the back of that, we managed to find, we kind of created a diagnostic to figure out how sophisticated your data practices were. We could categorize clients or prospects or any company, depending on whether they were, good with data, bad with data, whether they were customer ignorant or customer clairvoyant. We came up with this whole sort of narrative around customer obsession. And that has now given me the bedrock for our next major program, which is due to be launched at the end of the year. And that will sort of build on the data mastery idea or the customer obsession idea and talk about agentic and figure out what the possibilities are around experience when you have that agentic engine in place, powered by, a data architecture, data strategy that really works. So that's where I'm going with my next research. And what's been really useful is I kind of have a data set, and the data set I then kind of cut and slice in many different ways. So I can do, here's the data view for BFS, here's the data view for life sciences, for telecom, for the UK, for America. I can look at it around best practices. I can look at it around other bits and pieces as well. So that's been particularly well received within the company.
You have a roadmap. You have your map. You know which way you're going, and now it's executing. Much better position to be in than to say we're not sure what our thought leadership roadmap is here.
Well, so there is a map, and I'm really pleased that we've sort of got a direction. And I think the leadership have recognized we've got a direction, even though things are all changing around AI and agentic AI. The way I sort of see it is it really is an accelerant to what we're about. And what we're about is driving customer centricity for every single client. And AI, agentic AI, Gen AI is an accelerant for that. So you have that big story, and then we have this sort of thought leadership that kind of paints a picture of how you actually get to that customer centricity piece through some of the service offerings and some of the, I guess, the credentials through the case studies that paint a picture of what that looks like.
I think your approach has been very good. Approach to your thought leadership strategy, your thought leadership research strategy. It's very good from my experience, and the fact that I know a lot of people who have run thought leadership over the years who kind of became order takers. Like, this practice would say, we need a study on this. This practice would say, we need a study on this. And so the order taking thought leadership chief would say, yes, sir, and the studies would have no cumulative impact. And so, but you've been, I think, quite the opposite. You've been quite intentional with the topics that you're pursuing. Would you agree with that? And would you agree with my kind of supposition, which is it's much better to be intentional, to have a thought leadership topic strategy, so that study 1, study 2, study 3, study 4, study 8 can add up to far more than they would individually on very different topics?
I think so. We have we have created a thought leadership architecture. We didn't really have one before I got here. The messaging is much clearer and crisper as a result. So that really has helped.
How about your career in thought leadership? How it began and how it has evolved? You were at Cognizant, and then how did you get to Virtusa?
Well, I was at Cognizant for 10 years, and 10 years is a very long time in any one role. It's testament to Cognizant and the people that I worked with. I did stay so long. But after a change, we had a new CEO, and it became clear that the Center for the Future of Work wasn't seen as strategic as it should have been, in my opinion. It really was one of the best things that the company had. And the change of leadership meant, well, it's time for me to change. So I ended up as the chief poet, so to speak, here at Virtusa, or storyteller, messenger, whatever it is. And I've really enjoyed it. It's a very different company. It's a lot smaller, but the challenges are just the same as Cognizant, I would say, but you have less people to help you sort them out. So that's how I describe Virtusa. But this is a company which is beginning to sort of see the opportunity from the switch in technology and is starting to make the right moves to support that change in technology. So I'm really excited about what the next few years are going to bring here.
It seems to me that Virtusa is really serious about moving, intently down the thought leadership track, and that they see it as a key to growth. Looking back in your career, for somebody who's considering entering the thought leadership profession, what would you say to that person about the pluses of the profession? If you like to do this, this, and this, you will love this profession. And if you hate to do this, this, and this, you will hate this profession.
Oh, that's a good question. I think if you love reading and you love writing and you have a naturally inquisitive mind, I don't know how that comes across as a verb. If you have kind of a probing mind that's constantly sort of questioning things, you will love this role. I find the reading and the writing especially enjoyable. My boss, Andrew Parker from Forrester, always used to say, think in ink. And I feel thinking in ink is a really powerful, logical way of expressing an idea or expressing a sentiment. I think you can sort of go through decks and kind of hash them around. You never get the flow through from just sort of thinking with a laptop or a piece of paper, sort of kind of crafting your narrative.
Euan mentions here a boss of his during his 6 years at Forrester Research. Andrew Parker was the vice president and analyst covering IT services in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. A Forrester webpage commemorating Parker called him a wonderful analyst, always willing to aim for the stars with a controversial or ambitious idea, and a wonderfully stubborn supporter of his direct reports and teammates. Tragically, Parker died in 2010.
So for me, those three things, the reading, writing, and just constantly questioning things around you, those are really important attributes of what it takes to succeed in thought leadership, I would say.
And if you don't like doing certain things, you won't like this profession. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, if you find it difficult to deal with other people's egos, that would be really, really difficult. I think if you're unable to take feedback constructively, that's a bit of a red flag or a bit of a problem. And my final one, if you're not keen on technology, if you're not keen to embrace technology, then this will be really, really difficult as well. So you can't think about thought leadership without thinking about some of the new tools now, which are really exciting actually to use. Some of the ways in which you can do research and desk research is now done in minutes as opposed to weeks that used to take me hours and hours and hours to do. So I think leaning into the technology, if you don't like to lean in technology, that will also be a bit of a problem as well.
Especially for those who might be anti-AI, for whatever justification they have. Would you say if you don't approve of AI, if you don't like AI, if you don't think AI is going to have any beneficial impact on your work, this is not the right profession to be in?
I'd agree with that. I mean, I think it's always worth having a bit of a caution with AI. You have to sort of really think through what's it returning. Is it right? But there's no doubt these tools are going to be with us for the next 50, 100 years. And they're going to, change how your grandkids work and how my grandkids work. They really are. So I think just being kind of conscious of them, and I've seen huge strides in the last year or so, how some of these tools and technologies are really beginning to change how we work, to the point where I think you can scale ideas really quickly and gain inspiration really quickly, but that human spark is still needed. And I think if you like reading, if you like writing, and you have a naturally inquisitive mind, then you should be okay with it.
All right. What 3 pieces of advice would you give to people? I guess they've decided to get into thought leadership, or they've been in 10 years, 15 years, but they really want to go somewhere, right? What 3 pieces of advice do you think are most important for them to rise in this profession?
Number 1, find a mentor. there's no doubt that you need a mentor in order to advance. And that mentor might not be, or mentor, as you say in the US, that mentor might not be in your company, it might be outside your company, but it's worth thinking through who that person could be or that people could be to help you kind of bounce your ideas off and give you a bit of inspiration. Number two, I would say keep writing. I like writing every day or writing once a week, but even if it's not related to work, I mean, if you looked at my, I don't publish, I kind of keep a journal, but if you look at my journal of things that I write about really strange things and odd things that I've come across. A lot of, for example, I'm quite into Greek history at the moment, so there's a lot of things around philosophy which I find really interesting. There's lots of things around beer brewing that I like to write about. There's lots of things around education that I find particularly interesting when you look at, how we're educating our kids for the next wave of work. So just having a bit of an open mind and working and sort of writing, I would say. And number three, network. Get out and network within your company. Find the band of brothers or the band of sisters that can really help you round out your thinking or help supplement your thinking or help open up new ideas that you might not have realized are important for you to look at. So those are my three. I have to say, I think half my career I spent as an analyst. That really did help actually build a foundation for thought leadership, because you just had to learn to tap dance on lots of different subject areas, and you had to front to pretty senior folks when you were quite junior, and it just gave you the confidence to sort of hold an opinion. And I found that we did presentation training at IDC. My first presentation was a real car crash, actually. It was meant to be 40 minutes. It was done in 10 minutes. I rabbited like you wouldn't believe. And I think you have to have those reps, those practice to sort of go again. So I feel that if you can have an opportunity to present and practice, then it really, really helps. And if you can get in front of network to get in front of people, that really helps as well. And don't be afraid to give your point of view, even if you think it's counterintuitive to what everyone wants to hear. I find you just have to say, well, this doesn't seem right to me. I feel we should be looking at this rather than that. And you often find it creates a little bit of a pause, and people respond to it because they want to think a little bit more than just blindly following what's going on.
Are you saying that you need to have an opinion? If you're in the thought leadership field, you need to have an opinion, and you need to be able to weigh in on it with confidence, but also give people time to absorb and push back.
No, it's quite interesting. I'll still give you an example how it fitted together. So I had a kind of interesting conversation the other day about time. And I've done a little bit of writing about time because I find it quite interesting the way the Greeks think about time. They have chronos time and kairos time. And chronos is chronological, like when you look at the clock and the seconds are ticking away and the minutes and the months and the years, and you figure out I need to get that done by the end of next week. Whereas kairos is a lot more fluid and a lot more thoughtful when you think is the right time to do something, or when you think is the right time to ask for, a thought leadership position or something like that. So I found it quite useful to have an opinion. And if you've written about it, you've sorted out the logic in your head. And when you tell people about it, or, boss asks you about it, they'll just go, I haven't really thought about that. So you sort of tie these concepts together, and it really does, work. And I think that's storytelling, but it's also thought leadership, how you bring these pieces together.
I really love what you're saying about writing, and I don't do enough writing myself. But it seems to me what I'm hearing from you is that writing is a way for you to crystallize your thinking into a persuasive argument. Whereas if you didn't do all this writing, the ideas would still often be nascent?
Flying around. You're right. So I remember thinking or recognizing when someone said writing is like mental labor. So it's like mental labor. You have to sort of sit down and just get it done. But when you go to the gym or you go for a run or you go for a swim, it's the same thing. You're sort of conditioning your body and, beginning to get fit for life. And I think writing does that. It helps you get mentally fit for what's next. So I will be doing more writing now after this, because I've recognized that I don't do enough. But the actual process of sitting down, sometimes I think, I really can't be bothered with. But when you just, after you've got through the first 5 minutes, you find it just flows, and you're sort of in the zone, and you're beginning to sort of pull strands together. So I agree. I think you have to have an opinion or show up with an opinion. And if you can write, then your opinions are maybe a little bit more formed than if you just sort of shouted out in a meeting, hey, have you thought about time in a different way? Sort of, what do you mean? Well, we should be more fluid. It doesn't quite work. So hopefully that sort of brings it home.
It does. I mean, it's a good feeling for me when I write something and I think, boy, I really made something that was incoherent in my head coherent. Like, I didn't know if I could do this before I started to type, but I guess I did.
Yeah. There's one thing which I need to do more is more LinkedIn work, because I know you're quite active on LinkedIn. It's a goal that I need to do more writing on LinkedIn. So that's something which, I think is a really good way of signaling to, your community or even to yourself that you've got some good ideas and, they're worth thinking through.
Person to follow on LinkedIn just to see his technique. He's been a long-time consultant to Chief Human Resource Officer, CHROs. Dave Ulrich. Dave has like 300,000 LinkedIn followers. He's a former professor, University of Michigan. He's got a consulting company, but he is prolific on LinkedIn. He is weighing in on other people's stuff very constructively, very, with a lot of compliments, but also kindly debates and his own stuff. He writes a lot of articles, and Dave must be in his 70s. I mean, he's phenomenal how prolific he is on LinkedIn. The HR, the CHRO community, big companies, they know him. They love him because he's weighing in every week on some issue of it's going to be likely to be an issue of theirs.
Yeah. I bet he gets invited to a lot of talks and a lot of seminars and conferences to give his point of view. I mean, I've seen that in my industry. I mean, HfS is very good at working points of view. They've got some really interesting sides around culture and the future of culture. And I find that fascinating because I feel corporate cultures are beginning to break down. And I worry about the next generation coming into an office and deciding, well, you know what, I might as well work at home. And then you start to sort of see culturally things begin to shift. So I think it's a really interesting way of sort of trying to drive a conversation or drive some thinking through an industry about, what's next and what's going to happen. And that's where I have to say the stuff in LinkedIn, there's so much sort of strands there for thought leadership that you can pick up. There's posts I save all the time where I think, okay, that's really interesting. Okay, that's really interesting. How do I turn that around into what I want to write about? Because it's sort of tangential, but there's something in there which I think is really useful.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you left a like and if you shared the episode with your colleagues. Everything Thought Leadership is a video and podcast series from Buday TLP. It's for thought leaders and thought leadership professionals, the people who help experts get recognized as thought leaders. You can find out more about Buday Thought Leadership Partners at budaytlp.com.